everyone. This is Fadi, and I want to welcome you back, as always, for a continuation of this video series that we have titled Muhammad, a Critique. Today, we are going to take a look at the differences when we compare the historical data that we have concerning the origin of Christianity versus the origin of Islam. With me here in studio to discuss all of this is Dr. J. Smith. Dr. J, welcome back.
Well, so good to have you back again. And we're going and we're looking at where the sources are. So let's go back to the slide again, and let's go to the slide that we ended with before in the last segment. Take a look at that slide there, and you will see that we have four different genres, three different colors. Look at the upper left, the CIRA, which is the biography of Muhammad. We know that according to what Islam tells us, it's Ibn Hisham and Waqidi who write those down. According to Islam, the Hadith, that's the blue part, it's Bukhari, Muslim, Tirmidhi, Majah, Dawud, and Nisa. And then, of course, according to Islam, the Tafsir and the Tahqiq were both first introduced by Tabari. But look at the dates, just look at the dates. Hisham 833, Waqidi 835, Bukhari and on down 870, 875, 884, 887, 899, 915, Tabari 923. That's 9th and 10th century. There's the problem right there. That's what the Muslims are aware of. Only the scholars really are aware of that. The Muslim on the street is not aware how late these are. Those are 200 to 300 years later. But that's not the only problem. Let's continue on with the slide. Look at the next slide. It's not just that they are so late, it's also where they live. Now, we've been told, if you look at the slide there, according to the Muslims, that everything takes place in those two cities, Mecca and Medina, in the Hijaz, in the central part of Arabia. That's not the case at all. When you look and see what all the writing was done is in that city, Baghdad, which is 1,200 miles away. What's more, when you want to look and see the individuals who actually wrote the material down, let's start with Ibn Hisham, since he's the earliest. He was born in Basra, he grew up in Cairo, but he did his writing in Baghdad. Basra is 1,200 miles away, Cairo is 990 miles away, and Baghdad is 1,200 miles away. So everything that he wrote was much further to the north, was not down in Mecca and Medina. He did all his writing there. When we get to al-Bukhari, he grows up in Bukhara, which is in Uzbekistan. That is 2,600 miles away, way to the north and to the east, in Uzbekistan. And then for the Tafsir and the Tahqiq, we go to Tabari, and Tabari, as you can see, is right there in what is today northern Iran, in Tabaristan. That's why he's called Tabari, named after where he came from. So what that tells us is that none of these traditional writers lived or worked in Mecca or Medina. They were way too far to the north of Mecca and came from the west and east of Baghdad. And this area that they come from, these northern areas are where the Abbasids came from. These are all Abbasid writers. That means after 750. They're all from that time period. Now, obviously, you see a problem with this, and many people say, well, you in Christianity, you have the same problem. You have the exact same problem. Now, they say that, you also are based, everything you have is based on oral tradition. Years and years of oral tradition. In fact, most of people, when they ever bring this up, they always say, well, who is this? Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John. They didn't, really, this is material written in the 2nd and 3rd and 4th century, redacted back to the 1st century. No, it is not. So let's do a comparison. And what I want to do, go back to the slide again, and I want to ask the very same question that we've asked of Islam. Let's ask it of Christianity, and let's look at our Hadith. Let's look at our CIRA. Let's look at our Tafsir. Let's look at our Tahqiq. Now, Al-Fadi, you know this very clearly, that our CIRA would be the Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John, the black letter part of the gospel accounts. That's what he did, especially in the last 3 years. The Hadith of Jesus would be the red letter. Whenever he spoke in the gospel account, that would be the Hadith. The Tafsir would be Paul's letters in Philippi, in Corinth, in Ephesus.
And even other letters in general.
At any time there are letters, these are the commentaries that explain how to take what Jesus said and apply it to those cities.
That's right.
And then, of course, the Tahqiq would be the early church history in the book of Acts. So let's put them up on the screen. Let's look at the slide. So according to what we now know, and I'm taking the most liberal scholars, I'm taking the most liberal accounts, I'm going to step on toes a lot of Christians, but we do know that Jesus died in 33 AD. Now, the first genre that comes to part would be the Tahqiq, which are the book of Acts, written between 52 and 62 AD. That's within 20 to 30 years, written by Luke within 30 years of Christ's death. Then comes Paul's letter He was killed in 65 AD. He starts writing his tafsirs, or his commentaries, unpacking what Jesus said, within 15 years of Christ's death. So between 48 to 65 AD, that's within 15 to 34 years. You then have Mark, who introduces the first CIRA and the first hadith, die around 70 AD, well, that's 37 years. Then you're followed by Matthew and Luke, who introduced their CIRA and their hadith around 80 AD, that's 47 years. And then finally, you have the Gospel of John, the last CIRA and the last hadith, introduced around he dies in 90 AD, so within 57 years
and
of
these
Christ's
are
death.
the most extreme liberal dates.
Most extreme liberal dates. Now notice, that means within 29 to 57 years, everything we know about what Jesus said, what he did, how his Christianity began, all were introduced within 60 years. What's more, look up at the screen, what's even more important, all of these writers, these New Testament writers, they lived in the same place Jesus lived. And they either knew him personally, like John and Matthew, or they got the material from others who saw what he did, like Mark and Luke, Paul and the others, and heard what he said. So that's why when you do like with like, if you do a comparison, look at the screen, everything we have about Jesus Christ comes within 15 to 60 years of his death, written by in the same area, not hundreds of miles away, like we have, or thousands of miles away, like we have with Bukhara. Whereas in Islam, everything they have for their prophet Muhammad comes from 200 to 300 years later, hundreds of miles too far to the north. So which would you consider to be more authoritative?
Well, I mean, it doesn't take a genius to figure that out. Christianity is more reliable.
Much more reliable, because our material is closer to the event, both as far as time-wise and as far as direction.
And also, I can accept the fact that someone within the span of 60 years was still alive as an eyewitness. I would expect that and accept it at the same time. And if you tell me, oh, well, how can someone who lived with Jesus 30, 40 years later remember things? Watch what you're saying, because you tell me memory is important in Islam, right?
Now, let's just put it on the other foot. Let me just end with this. Look at the slide again and notice, as a comparison, if we as Christians had to depend on sources for Jesus compared to what Muslims are dependent on for Muhammad, Jesus would not begin to appear until the 3rd century. And everything we know about what he said and what he did will be written by men who are living way up in Turkey hundreds of years later and redacting it back to the 1st century. How in the world do we defend him?
That's right.
Thank goodness we don't have this problem. This is unique to Islam.
Absolutely. What are we going to cover next time?
Well, now we get into the real diddy stuff. Now we get into where the mud hits the fan. That's coming up next, because I'm going to shut down everything I've just said. I'm going to now tell you that almost everything I've introduced
shut down the
Islamic material.
I'm
going to shut it down because of some new information, some new research by Dr. Pat Andrews that's taken 2 years to come to the fore, that's going to now throw all of this out of whack.
Wonderful. Thank you, brother. Thank you, everyone. Until next episode, have a blessed day. Thanks for watching. Please like, subscribe, share, and comment. And ring the bell so you will be notified when we release new content. Our mission is to reach Muslims with the gospel of Jesus Christ and help Christians engage with their Muslim neighbors. If you want to join us in this life-changing work, please support us on patreon.com/CIRA International, or just click on the link below.